Today is a historic one for the people of this state. Here in this lofty and strong place that is our capital, the day dawned brilliantly on the ground where patriots, friends, allies, and all who long for a stronger and unalienable freedom would gather to stand together for new and stronger representation for all citizens of this great state. The tides of time and fate and history ebb and flow through brief eras of freedom, framed by long and shadowed ages of tyranny. Nearly 2.5 centuries ago, the world entered one such era of freedom. To mark the new age's conception, men who were brave enough, strong enough, and courageous enough to take a stand declared triumphantly that their days of living beneath the cumbersome and weighty yoke of a distant, oppressive tyrant were finished. They were willing enough to lay down all that was dearest to them and to count it all as worthless compared to a life in which they all might have the ability to truthfully say that they were free men. Now the period of freedom set in motion by our nation's founders balances upon a fine line, ready at any moment to tip and fall into the depths of a new and dark age of oppression in which men who once knew the taste of freedom upon their lips might even forget that they ever possessed such an easily stolen thing as liberty. And while we the people balance and cling upon this morbidly steep precipice, hoping to hold to what freedom remains for us in this state of Oregon, there pushes against us a force which seems unstoppable and so encroaching that we can almost feel her hands clutching at our throats in hopes of extinguishing our voice once and for all. This force is the undeniably evident tyranny of the woman who sits in the building behind me, searching for new ways to push down upon everyday American citizens and take from them the representation and the freedom that is their God-given, unalienable right as endowed by our Creator and outlined in our Declaration of Independence and our Constitution. But even now, when we've nearly lost all hope, when many of our fellow citizens have resigned to give up the fight and leave, or to simply endure their oppression without protest, and when it almost appears that Kate Brown and radical legislators who think they have a right to do whatever they please, there is still hope dawning on this day. There is hope so long as patriots and warriors and dedicated citizens gather together to stand against and to protest the inhibitive oppression of our newly elected overlord, Kate Brown, and her inter-party servants here in our Congress. Indeed, there is hope, for the words of our founders still ring softly and wait for living men and women of courage to echo them out proudly and to declare once again our independence from tyrants and oppressors who would seek to take our freedom away. And so, please indulge me in allowing the time for me to echo these words again, here on the steps of our Capitol, that we would invoke a spirit of freedom and unity so strong that it could even one day topple the regime of Queen Brown and her loyal subjects in the legislature. So, this is the Declaration of Independence from the perspective of Oregonians, directed towards Governor Kate Brown. When in the course of human events it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands which have connected them to another, and to assume among the powers of the earth the separate and equal station to which the laws of nature and of nature's God entitle them, a decent respect to the opinions of mankind requires that they should declare the causes which impel them to the separation. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed, that whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or to abolish it, and to institute new government, laying its foundation on such principles and organizing its powers in such form as to them shall seem most likely to effect their safety and happiness. Prudence indeed will dictate that governments long established should not be changed for light and transient causes, and accordingly all experience hath shown that mankind are more disposed to suffer while evils are sufferable than to right themselves by abolishing the forms to which they are accustomed. But when a long train of abuses and usurpations, pursuing invariably the same object, evinces a design to reduce them under absolute despotism, it is their right, it is their duty, to throw off such government, and to provide new guards for their future security. Such has been the patient sufferance of this state of Oregon, and such is now the necessity which constrains them to alter their former systems of government. The history of the present governor of Oregon is a history of repeated injuries and usurpations, all having in direct object the establishment of an absolute tyranny over this state. To prove this, let facts be submitted to a candid world. She has refused her assent to laws the most wholesome and necessary for the public good. She has forbidden her legislators to pass laws of immediate and pressing importance, unless suspended in their operation until her assent should be obtained, and when so suspended, she has utterly neglected to attend to them. She has called together legislative bodies at places unusual, uncomfortable, and distant from the depository of their public records for the sole purpose of fatiguing them into compliance with her measures. She has endeavored to prevent the population of these states, for that purpose obstructing the laws of naturalization of foreigners, refusing to pass others to discourage their migrations hither, and raising the conditions of new appropriation of lands. She has obstructed the administration of justice by refusing her assent to laws for establishing judiciary powers. She has made judges dependent on her will alone for the tenure of their offices and the amount and payment of their salaries. She has erected a multitude of new offices and sent hither swarms of officers to harass our people and eat out their substance. She has combined with others to subject us to a jurisdiction foreign to our Constitution and unacknowledged by our laws, giving her assent to their acts of pretended legislation, for quartering large bodies of illegal aliens among us, for protecting them by a mock trial from punishment for any crimes which they should commit on the inhabitants of the estates, for cutting off trade with all parts of the country, for imposing taxes on us without our consent, for taking away our charters, abolishing our most valuable laws, and altering fundamentally the forms of government. She has plundered our lands, ravaged our coasts, made destitute our towns, and destroyed the livelihoods of our people. She has excited domestic insurrections among us and against us, and has endeavored to bring on the inhabitants of our frontiers as illegal immigrants whose known rule of warfare is an undistinguished destruction of all ages, sexes, conditions, and livelihoods. In every stage of these oppressions, we have petitioned for redress in the most humble terms. Our repeated petitions have been answered only by repeated injury. A queen, whose character is thus marked by every act which may define a tyrant, is unfit to be the ruler of a free people. We have warned our own people from time to time of attempts by their legislature to extend an unwarrantable jurisdiction over us. We have reminded them of the circumstances of our immigration and settlement here, and we have appealed to their native justice and magnanimity. And we have conjured them by the ties of our common kindred to disavow these usurpations, which would inevitably interrupt our connections and correspondence with one another. They, too, have been deaf to the voice of justice and of consanguinity. We must, therefore, acquiesce in the necessity which denounces our separation, and hold them as we hold the rest of mankind, enemies in war, in peace, free friends. We therefore, the representatives of the people of Oregon, in General Congress assembled together, appealing to the Supreme Judge of the world for the rectitude of our intentions, do, in the name and by authority of the good people of this state, solemnly publish and declare that this state is, and of right ought to be, free and independent of Governor Kate Brown, that they are absolved from all allegiance to her, and that all political connection between us and the current governor is and ought to be totally dissolved, and that as free and independent people, we have full power to levy a usurpation of her office and elect a new governor by method of recall. We have the right to contract alliances and to do all other acts and things which independent people may of right do. and for the support of this declaration with a firm reliance on the protection of divine providence, we mutually pledge to each other our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor. Thank you.
Yeah.